Okay, so we can accept that when it comes to talking about timelines, there can be inconsistencies. As you review the information in your head, you may clarify a few things so that when you repeat the timeline, you may have narrowed in time frames, etc., and the time frames may change. Why am I saying this? Well, when it comes to Chris and Deb Sterns, there are so many inconsistencies with their timelines in terms of around the time that Chris Stearns went up to Orlando to help Jen and Stefan. But when it comes to factual things, when you start to see inconsistencies there, that's when you've got to ask, why are there inconsistencies and what is the actual truth here? So the inconsistency I want to look at in this video is around Stefan's bedroom. And this comes down to, did Chris and Deb find something in Stefan's bedroom that perhaps they removed because it was incriminating? Did they go in Stefan's bedroom or did they not go in Stefan's bedroom? That's a big question. And if they've said that they didn't go in Stefan's bedroom at one point, but at another point said that they did, why would that be? So I've got several clips that I'm going to go through just to clarify what I'm talking about here. And then as we go through these clips, I'll delve a bit further into what is actually going on in this situation.
Yeah, so what we'd like to do is, given that he went down there, we'd like to make sure like he didn't stash her in the bedroom and hey, just hang out here.
No, she's been sorting out his bedroom because he lives like a fucking pig.
Okay, so for context, that audio is from the very first interview that Chris Stearns did with law enforcement. That was the interview where at the end of it they informed him that his son had been arrested because of his CSAM materials. And at the point where this occurred in the interview, I'm guessing that that information hadn't been relayed to this officer. Because if you listen to this interview, the first part of it, they're kind of desperate to get into the storage container, they're desperate to check in the house, and then there's a break, and then after that break, they've put on the brakes, essentially, and they're like no longer in a rush to get into the storage container, and they're like, okay, we're happy to wait for a warrant, and yada yada. You can tell that during that break, that's when they've been informed that this stuff has been found on Stearns' phone and that he's been arrested. So they're no longer in a rush to check for Maddie in the house or the storage container, because they, at that point in time, it seems that they have perhaps changed direction in their investigation, and I think it's at that point in time when they are suddenly realising that there's probably a good chance that Maddie is deceased. So this is in the first half of the interview, when they are still very much about, we believe Maddie's still alive, we're trying to find her. And so they're saying to Chris Stearns, we want to send someone to your house to double check that he hasn't stashed Maddie in his bedroom, because we know that he was down there in the middle of the night. And you've got this reply that, well, no, I know she's not in his room because Deb is in there organising his room because he lives like a pig. So that is worth bearing in mind as you listen to subsequent clips.
But he was in Orlando until I'm gonna.
3 o'clock maybe Sunday, and then he left, because I told him
Yeah, that's what I told
he
him.
had to take care of his room, clean the mess out of there before he could go.
Yeah.
So he did that, and he got up there at 6:30 or so.
Now that statement was actually later on in the same interview. He's saying, well, he left Northport around 3 o'clock on Sunday because before he left, he had to organise his room and get rid of the crap that was in there. Basically, he is saying here, and he's saying, which he did, and then he left. So you've got, in this part here, Chris Stearns is saying, well, before he left to go to Kissimmee on the Sunday, he had to tidy his room and organise it and get rid of the rubbish that was in there. And he's saying that he actually got in and did that. But then, when the police are saying, well, we need to get into Stefan's room to check and see if Maddie's in there, Chris turns around and says, well, Deb's in there at the moment sorting out or dealing with his room because he's such a pig. To me, that seems like a total inconsistency. Because if Stefan had already done that a few days before, why is she in his room then, supposedly cleaning it out, if he actually had done that himself before he left to go to Kissimmee? So to me, that pricked up my ears, and I'm like, well, what is actually going on here? Because he's just contradicted himself really badly. Either Stefan cleaned his room before he left on the Sunday, or Deb's in there cleaning his room because he's a slob and he doesn't clean his room. If Stefan cleaned his own room on the Sunday, why is Deb currently in his room? What is she doing in his room? Why is it so important for her to be in his room at that period of time?
I was 10 or something. I'm all tucked into bed. I got the boys with me, and I may have been partially asleep because I had my phone on silent, and then I woke up because the phone was vibrating, and then my watch would have been in the office. So the phone was vibrating. By the time I got it, there was no connect. So then that was at 10:42, and then I made an out call at 10:43, and then the conversation was about, you need to come up here.
And who says that?
They both did because they were on speaker.
Okay.
And Stefan said, hey, you need to come up here. And I said, okay. I said, so we discussed, they were being kicked out. They didn't have a place to stay. So I said, well, we need to figure out where to go for, where to stay and what have you. And so.
Now this is still the same interview, and he's claiming here that they rang him around 11:15, both of them were on the phone, saying, you need to come up here. And he says that within that conversation, they're saying that they had been kicked out of the townhouse and that they needed to find somewhere to stay. Here's the thing, they didn't know that until 12:10, so a bit over an hour later, because that was when Jen Soto's interview ended. And that was when law enforcement informed her that she would not be allowed back into the apartment that night. So him saying that they rang him to say, you need to get up here, actually has nothing to do with them being kicked out of the apartment, because that occurred after the phone call. If, as he says, the phone call occurred at 10:42, with him returning the call at 10:43. And he sounds pretty precise about that. It sounds like he has actually checked the times here to be clear on what time he received that call. So basically, he's received that call prior to them being kicked out of the apartment, there is a different reason for them needing him to go up to Orlando, other than the needing to get into a hotel. He doesn't tell us what that reason is. At one point in time, he mentions, well, you know, if I'd have known these things, I wouldn't have gone up there to help them out, which a lot of people have presumed it means to help them out with getting a hotel room, but they paid for their own hotel room. Jen claims in one interview that she couldn't afford it and that they rang Chris because they couldn't afford the hotel room, and yet he's made it quite clear that actually he did not pay for their hotel rooms. They paid for their own hotel rooms. They also paid for having the dog at the hotel. He reimbursed them. So him travelling to Orlando in the middle of the night wasn't necessarily connected to them needing to get a hotel room. He was already on the road on the way to Orlando when they were kicked out of the apartment. Keep that in mind. And how does this relate back to them saying that Deb had been cleaning Stefan's room? Well, let's just listen to a little bit more.
No, he's lived in a
Did
pigsty.
he use the C word? Clean? No. Always a challenge to get him to pick up his room. Mm-hmm. Always.
I was going to surprise him and put a hazmat sticker across his door.
Mm.
Because I opened it and looked at it and shut the door again and said, not going in there. So then I offered to help him clean his room. I said, look, it's hard when it's that bad to even know where to start. I said, I will help you.
Again, we have the contradiction occurring. So here, this is in the next interview that was done, so this would have been about the 6th of March. And this is the interview with both Deb and Chris, as you can tell. So in this interview, Deb is claiming that she wouldn't go into his room because of how disgusting it was. Basically that she was going to put a hazmat sticker on the door of his room because of how bad it was, and that she wouldn't go in there because of that. And then she does say, I offered to help him clean it or get it organised. And she explains that she had said to him, because sometimes when it's that bad you become overwhelmed and then it's hard to know where to start. Now, you could see that as her saying, you know, implying that she would go in and do some of it for him. But to me, when someone says, I will help you with that, that means that you are still the person responsible for doing the work. They're going to help you with it. They're not going to do it for you. So we have her saying quite emphatically that she would not go into his room because of how disgusting it was, but that she had offered to help him. To me, that implies she would have been in there with him and saying, look, this is what you need to focus on first, and then letting him do it. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that is my understanding of helping. Certainly saying helping is not, especially when she's already said she would not go in there. Helping is certainly not implying that she would do it for him. So far you have, in that first interview, Chris Stearns saying, well, no, Maddie can't be in his room because Deb's in there right now tidying his room. And then not long afterwards, he's saying, well, before Stefan went to Kissimmee on the Sunday, he had to organise and tidy his room. Well, okay, so somebody organised and tidied his room. Either he did it or Deb did it, but you've got something's inconsistent there, something is not right. And then you have Deb saying, well, I wouldn't set foot in his room because it's disgusting. Now, just keep in mind also what I was saying about the hotel room, that Chris Stearns had to go there for some reason, but it wasn't to get them into a hotel room.
Did you guys ever witness or hear him looking up inappropriate stuff on the internet?
I have no idea because we never had access to his rooms.
He didn't use our computers, he had his own.
So right there, Chris Stearns says, we have no idea if he had inappropriate stuff on his computer because we never had access to his room. That's totally contradicting what he said in that original interview, where he said, well, no, I can tell you that Maddie's not in Stefan's room because Deb's in there right now organising it. She was in there before Stefan had been arrested. And yet now he's claiming that they never had access to his room. There's more to this. Let's listen.
Obviously his room is over here.
That
Do you
one.
mind if we look?
Yeah,
Go for it.
Is it the same way it was, pretty much?
No, we started cleaning it out
Cleaning.
because it's just he's existed in there. We haven't touched that room. At this point, he said, "Well, there's no way in hell he's ever coming back here. We're just going to gain access back to this
We
room and
gave
claim it as
the
ours."
other police complete access to it before we touched anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the stuff that I had thrown away, the trash off of his big table, I had left there in a bag, and I said, this is all I have done at this point, and if you want to go through the bag, you do it, you know?
Okay, so now they're saying we hadn't touched anything in his room. We only gained access back after he was arrested, which implies that they had not set foot in his room at all until after he was arrested. And then they're claiming that they didn't do anything to the room until after Northport PD had been there. But then they slip up and Deb says, well, the stuff that I had thrown out, I just left it in a bag for them to see. So she's admitting that she had been in the room before Northport PD came to go through the room. So there's a major slip up here and some major inconsistencies. And this takes me back to the question of why did Chris Stearns need to go to Orlando in the middle of the night when he went to help Jen and Stefan? And why have they claimed that they never go in Stefan's room? They didn't have access to Stefan's room. They didn't touch Stefan's room. When they've at the same time slipped up and admitted that same day that Stefan was arrested, just before that happened, Deb Sterns was in his room organising stuff. To me, this reeks. There is something very, very wrong with this. Were they already concerned? Why did Chris have to go to Orlando? I could imagine that Stefan Sterns would not have told him the truth about what was going on. Let's level there and say there's no way Stefan would admit the truth of what was going on. But at the very least, Chris and Deb must have realised that their son had done something wrong, because their actions to me scream that they thought that their son had done something wrong. Like I said, I think we can be 100% certain that he did not ring his father and say, well, I unalived Maddie, because he does not admit when he's done things wrong. We know that about Stefan. He is a liar. he has excuses for everything. He has stories for everything. So clearly, whatever he told his father wasn't the truth, but the fact that they said, you need to come up here to Orlando, means that they were believing that there was something going on, something wrong. And it seems that Deb and Chris have both sprung into action. On one hand, they're telling law enforcement that no, we never touched Stefan's room. It is completely untouched. When Northport PD went in there to go through the room, we hadn't touched it. We only gained access back after we realised that he was never coming back. But then they contradict themselves, and Deb says, well, I told them that the stuff that I'd already thrown out into bags was just sitting there so they could take it. But you have that initial contradiction right at the very, very start. Them going, well, no, Maddie's not in Stefan's room because Deb's in there this very moment. Major inconsistencies. Why do they need to lie about Deb having been in Stefan's room? Did they remove things from Stefan's room that may have been incriminating? Were they checking for things in Stefan's room that may have been incriminating? What's really going on here? Because whatever is going on here with Chris and Deborah Sterns, they're only giving half the story. I think I've said this several times before. I don't believe that they would have stepped in and helped their son had they actually realised precisely what he had done. But I think that they thought he had gotten himself into trouble of a far less concerning sort, and were once again stepping in to fix the situation, not really knowing what it was that they were fixing. And then this has blown up, and they must feel horrible right now. But certainly, I believe they were definitely helping him. What were they trying to cover up? What did Stefan Sterns actually tell his parents when he said to his father, you need to come here now? Did they remove anything that could have been evidentiary value? Now, as some people have pointed out, legally, they're not really in any trouble, because it would be hard to prove that they have interfered with an investigation. Because if they have removed something from his room, it's long gone. And in terms of proving that they had been in his room before he was arrested, you only have that one statement, or two statements perhaps. Them saying, well, we threw out some rubbish before PD came to have a look through his stuff, would then account for any evidence of them having been in his room. So even if they had helped out by getting rid of any kind of evidence, it would be completely impossible to prove. So obviously there's never going to be any charges over anything, and for all we know, whatever they did, it may have been something completely harmless. It could just be maybe he had some illegal weapons or something in his room that they needed to get rid of. Or maybe he did have some suspicious items in his room that they were aware of that they wanted to get rid of. Who knows? But whatever's going on here, they lied to law enforcement. So I don't know what it means, But given their history of enabling him and covering up for his screw-ups, it does concern me a little bit. So, I'd love to hear what other people think about this. What's your take on this? Because the more I dig into Chris and Deb Sterns, the more I wonder about their involvement after the fact. I think we can be quite confident that they had no involvement in Maddie's death. They may or may not have known what Stephen Sterns had on his phone. Who knows? That's not something that I don't think could ever be proven. We know that Chris Stearns has a bit of a history himself. He's not proven to be the most honest person when you look at their divorce papers from many, many years back. So, to me, there is just something that's just not sitting right with me. But I'd very much love to hear what other people think about this. So, thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button and leave a comment below. What are your thoughts on this? Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.